We recording? All right. Call the meeting to order. Those of us at headquarters, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. On to approval of the agenda. Are there any adjustments? None. All right. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Commissioner Kenny, did you have your hand up or was that an aye?
I did have my hand up to request something.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's what I saw correctly.
So I would like to, on the consent agenda, pull out the body armor purchase, item 4D, and the brand name sole source for the Rebel Strike vehicle, 4E, for discussion by the board as I guess, not as part of the consent agenda, but like maybe the second half of that for discussion of those two items.
So we can move those into unfinished business. Then be item 10.
That sounds good.
Okay. Okay, so any other adjustments? None appearing. All those in favor? Yeah. Oh, we got a motion. That's right. Is there a second? You second? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fernhoff. It's been moved and seconded to move from the consent agenda items D as in David and E as in Echo to unfinished business, and we'll just put them at the bottom as D and E of unfinished business. So all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right. Then motion stands and we'll move forward. The agenda as it is. Consent agenda. We have claim vouchers totaling $615,841.39. The volunteer firefighter support personnel pensions resolution 101720023-24. Headquarters basement renovation bid approval and just those three items. Is there any discussion? Not appearing. All those in favor of the consent agenda, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Commissioner Teoflack raised his hand. Thanks. Approval of meeting minutes from September 19th, 2023 regular meeting. Any corrections, additions? All right. I move to approve the meeting minutes. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Teoflack. Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right. We are on to public comment. I don't see anybody here. We have a few attendees. If there's anybody online, please raise your hand. All right, nobody online or in person for public comment. On to public hearings. So for the 2024 South County Fire budget, I officially open for public hearing. Is there anybody, since we don't have anybody here, is there anybody online that wishes to comment? If so, please raise your hand. All right, none appearing. I close the public hearing for the 2024 South County Fire budget. And I open the public hearing for the 2024 benefit charge. Again, there's nobody here in the room for the public. Is there anybody online that wishes to speak? If so, please raise your hand. All right, not seeing any. I go ahead and I close the public hearing for the 2024 benefit charge. On to the fire chief's report with Chief Eastman.
Good evening, Chair Daniels, the rest of the board and the public. My chief's report will be quite brief tonight. We have been busy. And I've got three things. We had a house fire on the 13th of Linwood, October 13th, in the city of Linwood. We were dispatched at 3:30 in the morning. It was a vacant house put on the market the day before the fire happened. Flames were blowing out the second story window and extending the attic and roof when the first arriving firefighters arrived. The home experienced an explosion. And with that, we were still able to get the fire under control within 20 minutes and limit the extent of damage. No one was injured. And currently our investigators from South County are coordinating with Linwood Police Department detectives and who are investigating this fire as arson, and the investigation is currently ongoing. So over the last couple of weeks, that's only significant event that's happened that I know news media was on site and coordinated with Leslie on that. We did have an active shooter drill. I believe it was last week. Kind of a continuation of what they did at the mall. This was put on by our neighboring Fire District 4. It was we had several crews there. It was to the point where they had patients moulaged. They had helicopters flying in, taking patients. So it was a full exercise that dealt with transporting patients via various methods to local and regional hospitals. It went very, very well. And I think they got some good educational points and some lessons learned in conjunction with the CCTA, which is a document that Pierce, Snohomish, and King County have adopted for those kind of events. It was good to actually exercise that. And as you know, sometimes you go back to the way we used to do it. And so it was a great drill, well organized, and we've got some good lessons learned, which is the whole point of doing those. And then last, this week here at South County, we're doing, we brought in a company that's doing cancer screening on the employee group. And don't quote me on this. I think there was 250 appointments this week. And we filled them all. And so that's a huge positive. It's ultrasound cancer screening. I did it today. Looks at your thyroid, your carotid arteries, your heart, your liver, your spleen, your kidneys, your stomach, your bladder. And for men, they do ultrasound of the testicular region to make sure you don't have those theses. So, and we've had several, like I said, we filled every slot. So I'm going to say thanks, because without the support of the board, things like that wouldn't happen. And again, as far as taking care of our workforce, getting ahead of the curve, and making sure that they have long sustained careers and long fun retirements. This is one piece of where we're moving and happening this week. So with that concludes my chief's report.
Thank you, Chief Eastman.
No,
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Fernhoff?
I just want to say thank you, Chief, and it's important that we echo that pre-screening, that positive environment that we set up here at South County. I think that's really important and resonates with the constituents that we have and our members of the department, and we wish them all good health.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Chief Eastman, thank you for the report, and I'm glad that people are taking advantage of the cancer screening. On to the union report with VP Armstrong.
Good evening, staff. Good evening, commissioners. Good evening to the public. Thanks for having me again this week. I don't have a whole lot in my report. It'll be brief. Just want to say thank you to South County Fire. Thank you to the commissioners. I had my cancer screening today as well, and I appreciate that. I'll get the results in about 10 days, so we'll see how that goes. I think that's a positive step forward in our department and to protect our members and keep them safe. Early detection is the best detection, and it's the best cure, to be honest. So Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Our members are continuing to run calls every day. They perform fantastic at that fire, and everybody's doing a great job. I'm very honored to be a part of this department and to serve with those individuals. So thank you very much. That concludes my report, and I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, VP Armstrong. Commissioners, any questions? All right, none appearing. Thanks again for the report. On to unfinished business, item A, with deliberations on the chief's preliminary 2024 budget for discussion. Does anyone have anything further to say? Questions? For staff? All right. Our commissioners online, Kenny and Lawrence, any questions? Okay. Just wanted to make sure I got a head nod from everybody. On to the benefit charge for discussion with Chief Eastman and CFO Bothwell.
I guess now that we've done the public hearing, I guess, is there any additional questions specific to the benefit charge from the board? I don't have anything to add from last week's conversation about the benefit charge, and so I'm just making sure there's no additional questions from the board. We have nothing further to present.
Thank you. Commissioners? Commissioner Teoflat.
So the plan is just to do the 2% increase as usual?
Yep. So the plan is 2%, and what CFO Bothwell did is took what we charged in the benefit charge, added 2%. We were able to calculate what Briar Motley Terrace would have been, added 2%, added those together. And the resolution and the preliminary formula that's in your packet was based on that number. And I want to say it's 7,764,580, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a 2% increase from last year. Yes.
Great. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. On to item C, long-term revenue planning for discussion with CFO Bothwell.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Sorry about that.
It's a busy desktop.
Now you can see how disorganized I am. All right, so we've been talking about revenue planning for a few months now, and where we left this topic off is that staff was going to come back to you with some details on process and timeline for implementation. So that's what I have for you tonight. So as we work through this, staff's presented several options for revenue planning into the future. One of the options that we presented kind of emerged as the most popular one. So I've just labeled it the popular plan for this. And what that was, as a reminder, is a 10-year benefit charge renewal in 2024, an EMS levy renewal in 2027, and then guiding principles to guide revenue decisions thereafter. And those guiding principles are to plan for levy lid lifts when the levy is forecasted to degrade by 20%, and that's for the general fire levy and the EMS levy, and then to fund capital with voter approved debt. So if we were to follow that plan, the 2024 implementation timeline would be to go in the August primary, and we would have to start working on that in March of 2024 with an announcement by the board that the renewal is coming, and the board would have to hold a public hearing. On April 2nd, the board would need to consider a resolution authorizing the ballot measure, and then we would communicate that to the county. In spring and summer, we'd work on outreach and voter education. Votes would be counted on August 6th. And then if successful with voters, between the successful vote and the end of the year, the RFA plan would need to be amended to recognize the 10-year renewal. So one of the other things we were asked to do is add capital back into the plan. We had started with capital in the plan, and then we had taken it out so that we could focus on funding for operations. So when we add that back in, we show that in 2026. And the plan that we're talking about tonight, the popular plan, didn't have anything going to voters in 25 or 26. So this would not be, we wouldn't have competing ballot measures in 26 if we added capital back in. And then just by year, what we'd be working on is in 2024, we'd be working on the benefit charge renewal based on the schedule I just showed you. In 2025, we don't have anything going to voters, but we would be preparing for the capital bond and levy in 26. And there's a lot of work that we'd want to do to reopen the capital facilities plan, start to look at phases and funding strategies, get all those details in order for 26 when we go with the capital bond and levy. And then in 27, we'd be looking at the EMS levy renewal. And the next steps on this item are plan approval by the board, and then we will start moving towards implementation. That's the presentation.
Thank you, CFO Bothwell. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Teoflock?
Got a question, but when we had our budget workshops like that, when we were talking about this, I worked up that page, and so this is our preferred option, so I remember it. So I'm in support of it. Yeah.
Commissioner Kenny, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Bothwell, I don't see on that planning out for a number of years, the fire levy. And to my recollection, we haven't had a fire levy renewal in many years. And so I'm wondering why go with the EMS levy in 2027 versus the fire levy, because maybe you could describe for us where the fire levy is now. It must be drifting down.
Sure.
Going beyond 2027, what would be an anticipation of going back on the fire levy, and how low will we go?
So that's a great question. So the general fire levy, you may recall that when the benefit charge was implemented, we lost some of our capacity. We lost 50 cents of capacity, and then we were at the limit back when that was implemented. So since then, we've fallen below the limit, but we also have $7.5 million of bank capacity right now that we need to exercise, and that would increase our levy limit. I think we'll still be above the 20% degradation that would be kind of trigger going back out for a general fire levy as we exercise that bank capacity. So we have several years. The reason the EMS levy is showing as 2027 is because it's set to expire. So we have to go back out for a renewal on that one. Does that answer the question?
It does. I had a second question for you, and that is, I want to talk a little bit about, or have you talk a little bit about, the 20% degradation in a levy policy, because I don't know that we really talked through what that meant. So could you just describe for us what you mean by that?
Sure. So there's a number of factors, and one of these is that the RFA has a history back when it was District 1 and other entities of not letting the levy, the general fire levy or the EMS levy, degrade below 20%. And what that means is that if the EMS levy is the easiest example, if the maximum levy is 50 cents per thousand, we'd go back out and ask voters to reauthorize 50 cents per thousand. By the time it gets down to 40 cents per thousand, because assessed value has changed, then that would trigger us going back out to voters to raise it back up to the 50 cents per $1,000. And so what we would do, just from a financial planning perspective, is when we forecast that AV is going to be up high enough that it's going to drop the levy down below that 40 cents or to that 40 cents, then we would consider going back out to voters and asking them to raise the lid again back up to 50 cents. And that's true. That's a condition that will happen with both the EMS levy and the general fire levy. And so if you can get on a cycle of every time it dips down to has that 20% degradation, that you start to consider whether or not you need a levy lid lift, it becomes kind of a cyclical, kind of a maintaining the levies so that they can fund operations. And just from a theoretical standpoint, the reason that you would do that is because the assessed value represents the inflation, the effects of inflation and the things that are happening in the general economy that our property tax doesn't keep up with because of the limitation of 1% per year. And so that's kind of the logic behind doing that, is that our costs continue to increase, yet our primary funding mechanism degrades over time. And just from a political standpoint or from a voter's perspective, going back out at 20% is much more attractive. It's a smaller jump. If we go back out at 50%, then voters see that as this huge tax increase, even if we can kind of limp it along to that point. And it becomes less popular with voters. I think that's sort of the logic behind the 20% trigger.
So I don't know that we have talked that through as a board. I don't know that I would support that. I can say for sure that we did not have a 20% degradation policy in the past. And I'd be a little concerned by that because 20% would be a 10% reduction on the 50-cent EMS levy or a 20-cent reduction on the dollar fire levy, which are the maxes for those two levies. And that's not that much. The difference that we have now is that we have a third source of revenue, and that's the fire benefit charge, unrelated to assessed value. And the fire benefit charge can go very large. My recollection is that it could go up to 60% of our current budget. So that is another revenue source. We're also a lot larger in terms of assessed value than we were in the past. So each penny of assessed value increased brings in more money. Of course, we're a larger organization in the past, so we have more expense needs, but we are larger in terms of more assessed value that the AV is applying against. So I'm not, which brings us, it's kind of summarized in the idea of, in the more distant past, we have described ourselves as needing $2 a thousand of AV to fund South County Fire. And I don't know that that's true anymore due to the size in our AV. And we're not currently running at that. And so I'm not sure that having a policy of 20% degradation is the best. I definitely think we should think about it, and we should think about as the AV is going down. I agree with the general principles that you're talking about. If you let it slip too far, then it looks like a very large jump to the voters, and that can get hard to convince them to vote for. So I appreciate kind of that political perception side of it, but the other side of it is the raw dollars. And so a 10 point increase now, or a 20-point increase now that we asked for, is today with our assessed value is more than it was years ago when we were smaller. And so we're taking more dollars doing that. And so I think a component of it has to be, so how many raw dollars are we talking about? Because we don't necessarily need a 10-point increase in 1 year, and 2 years later, a 20-point increase to our AV. I think there needs to be an analysis there of, well, how many dollars are we talking about? As opposed to just a blanket policy of, well, it's drifted down 20%, so we've got to go to the ballot. I think there needs to be a more nuanced analysis of whether we do or not. So I generally agree with the concepts that you're talking about, but this is the first that I've seen us try to place a fixed number on it. My concern about the fixed number is that, Mr. Bothwell, I entirely expect you to, be ringing the alarm bell when it goes down that 20%, saying, well, policy says we got to go to the ballot. And I don't know that I want a policy that says that. I want to take a look at it, but I don't want to necessarily run off to the ballot. I think there's more to think about with it. Thank you.
So Commissioner Kenny, I think policy may be the wrong word. I think what we were trying to do from a strategic perspective from staff is use that as a guiding strategy for us to actually be thinking to do actually what you're talking about, right? For example, if we did that, then we as staff would be able to do that work and have that work done, bring to the board, have the conversation about the pros and the cons. What do we need? I think some of it comes to, now that we have the third funding mechanism, is we've really never played with property tax levies and the benefit charge and how we can, do a levy lid lift and then have the ability to reduce the benefit charge because we bring more in property tax, and how we do that balance. One of the things that what staff's trying to accomplish with this, at least from my perspective, is having at least a point in time where we have the conversation about when are we going to do levy lid lift, when's the right time to do it, and have a spot where there should be an expectation for the conversation. I think rather than say we're degraded at, 10 cents on the EMS levy, so we're going to ballot. I think staff was looking more from a perspective of a guiding principle, that staff would know what that is, anticipate that, be able to start having a conversation with the board, when we see that happening, to have this conversation to determine, what other revenue needs we need. If we did this, what the impact does to the benefit charge, is that appropriate? Because we know the benefits of the benefit charge versus property tax. But it gives staff the ability to long-term plan from that perspective. So I think we're looking at more of I'm going to say guiding principle, because that's the term we use for that will help staff know when to bring things forward to the board, and the board, hopefully under that guiding principle, would expect this stuff to come forward to have exactly the conversation you're talking about, Commissioner Kenny. And obviously then the board gets to choose at what point, at that point, where is AV? Is it up or down? What does the penny bring in? What is the total if we increase the levy? What does that mean? What does it do for the total picture? And so that's the premise behind that, is a guiding principle for staff to strategically work forward, and then maybe set an expectation to the board that you're going to hear about this. And then we have some conversation to be had about what we're going to do with our financial outlook. And is this the right time to go to a levy lid lift? Is it not the right time to go to a levy lid lift? We may choose, like you said, Commissioner Kenny, we're going to run our general levy at 75 cents. We're going to run the EMS levy at 40 cents and use that as the point to go and put more in the benefit charge. We just haven't gotten to a point where we've had the benefit charge long enough to actually do that work. And I think as we move forward with the 10-year benefit charge and start looking at how we're going to bring in additional revenue to cover the increased cost, staff just wanted a guide or some guidance in how we would look that forward. So we know what we should be bringing the board, and the board is expecting what we're bringing them rather than coming from the dark. So I don't think we want a policy that says thou, we will. I think it's a trigger point for us to do our work and have a conversation, and for staff to do their work, bring forward to you, and then say, here's the options, just like we've been doing. But we want to be, one, transparent, two, kind of get us all on the same page. And we can have further conversations about this, but that's the premise behind the guiding principle and the 20% conversation, Commissioner Kenny, versus hard set in stone policy. It was more for staff to have a guideline to do their work, to bring the information back before the board so you can make those financial decisions on behalf of the RFA.
Thank you.
So perhaps instead of policy, guiding principle would have been a better term.
It is called guiding principles. We have
Okay.
policies. They're in the financial policies. We have revenue policies. We're not proposing this to be one of those. This is just guiding principles. So
That's what I meant, was that 20%. So any other questions? Vice Chair Rowland.
So one thing that I haven't seen, I've got a long range forecast that the chief put in his budget that shows where we are, 2025, 2026, 2027. What I haven't seen is, given our choice here to do the benefit charge renewal and waiting till 2027 to do a lid lift, what does that do any changes to what our long-term forecast is? And I'll stop there because I'll have a couple more follow-up questions probably.
So it does. So it's not modeled in the chief's preliminary budget because we don't really have a plan at this point. So, but what it does is it preserves the options that currently exist. So we could use, if we have the benefit charge is going to expire in 2 years. If we have that for another 10 years, we have a couple options. We have the capacity in the fire benefit charge to increase it to cover the deficit. We also have the bank capacity in the general property tax levy. The reason that we have been kind of sitting on that bank capacity and not utilizing that is because it's sort of our insurance policy, because the benefit charge is going to expire if we don't renew it. And so if we have 10 more years on the benefit charge, it makes it, I think, a responsible choice to go ahead and exercise the bank capacity. So that's sort of the logic there. And we can model either of those scenarios. The difficulty though, if we don't have certainty around the benefit charge, we also sort of would have to put two scenarios in front of you. If you get if the benefit charge is approved by voters for 610 or permanent, this is what it would look like. If it's not, we can exercise the bank capacity, but we're falling off a cliff when this thing expires. And so because it's in the near term, we would probably have to put both scenarios in front of you. But if you followed this plan, or if this was the thing that got traction and the thing we actually implemented, that forecast could easily be adjusted to use the bank capacity or the benefit charge to shore up the ongoing deficit.
Gotcha. So the minimum fund balance to target that you have, that's in there, that's the amount that we want on hand at the beginning of the year in our bank accounts to help cover us from January till tax revenues come in,
You got it.
correct?
Yep.
So you're saying that for 2024, we're fine.
Mhm.
We're above. 2025 and 2026, we will start to, degrade that to the tune of, I guess it'll be done in March instead of April if we don't take any action by 2026, because it'll be down to 18 million at the beginning of that year. Or
Yeah.
is that
So
the end?
what that means is that while we're waiting for the property tax deposits for that first half payment, we would run the risk of running out of cash in the general fund.
So essentially what we have to do is exercise the bank capacity, do something to help shore that up. Otherwise, we'll start getting into the point where we'll get, through spring, we're going to be kind of hurting. So by 2027, no matter what if we use up all the bank capacity, 2027 comes around, we'll use up all of that by the end of 2026. If I read these numbers right, because there's about 4 million each year that will be in a deficit. That means that 2027 comes along, we're going to be doing this levy, which we don't start collecting till 2028. So 2027 is going to be a year that we either have to increase benefits charge to cover that to the tune of $4 million, something like that. Otherwise, we'll start off 2027 with a risk. Is that correct?
So I think that if we were to implement this plan, we have enough levers to pull to get us through all of what you're describing. There are scenarios where if the organization wasn't willing to exercise the bank capacity or increase the fire benefit charge to cover that deficit, we could end up in the situation that you're describing. But the tools are there and the options would be there if we executed the plan as it sits right now. The tools would be there to be able to do that. The other thing that I think that Commissioner Kenny might be interested in is that we have this concept of the underspend in the general fund. And so that we're forecasting a $3.5 million deficit this year. If history repeats itself, that's probably going to be closer to a $2 million deficit, just based on our average kind of underspend of the actual budget. And so you have, I guess the plan provides us enough options and wiggle room to be able to continue into the future. The really scary things for the organization from a financial standpoint is the expirations of primarily the benefit charge, but also the EMS levy, even though that's farther off into the future. The expirations are the things that are, put us in kind of a difficult situation, or could.
Gotcha. So we'll kind of know at the end of the year, or at the end of 2024, I should say. When does that go to the voters? The benefit charge
Based on this proposal,
February, or is that April?
This would be August.
It will be on the general election ballot. Okay, or primary ballot. Sorry. Thank you. So I guess my only thought is that means that we're constantly having to just top off a tank that's empty. We're not getting ahead at all throughout this entire process. What does it look like if we were to increase the funds so that we could float this without having that every single time we go, if it doesn't pass, or if we can't raise the lever, or we can't get the votes here to do it, that we're not going to be putting this organization into a kind of I don't want to say government shutdown type thing, but what do they call it? Where the government doesn't cut services so that they don't have to spend as much money.
Yeah. So
Dries did it. I can't remember.
So
term.
Most of that is attributable to our tax system and the 1% annual limit on property tax. The only tool that we have, and it's unique to to this organization or to fire organizations is the benefit charge. A permanent benefit charge would solve, I would say for my lifetime, the problem you're describing. Anything else, it's the nature of our system that we have to keep going out to voters and asking them to raise the limit or renew something. That's just the system in Washington State, and there's really no way around it other than the permanent benefit charge.
What would it look like if the voters didn't pass the 10-year benefit charge when we asked them to in 2024? We have one more bite at the apple. Is that correct? What if it doesn't?
We have
pass
two. We don't, the benefit charge doesn't expire till 26.
till 2026? So what is the organization? What are our options become if they don't pass this?
Well, I mean, it's not great, right? So we would have to look at exercising the bank capacity. What would happen is that we would get back. So if we didn't have the benefit charge, we'd get back up to $1.50 of capacity in the general fire levy. But we can't really, it takes a vote to increase it any more than what we currently have with the bank capacity. So we'd have to go out to voters with something.
Gotcha. So we would have a vote to extend, a vote to extend. It would fail, and then we'd have to do a vote to raise the levies. If they're not in the mood to extend the benefits charge, we're kind of getting ourselves into an area where we don't have any padding. So I am a little bit concerned about this plan just from that aspect. Because it puts things right at the points where we absolutely have to have them. It does make for a compelling case, but it also introduces risk that we're not prepared to deal with very easily if something doesn't pass.
Well, just to be honest, if we don't pass, we're making cuts,
Yeah.
right? If the citizens don't support funding measures, right? You know, I will tell you, the reality is in that anticipation, we are going to be forced to make cuts. Right? I mean, if the citizens don't want to give us additional revenue or choose not to allow us to continue the benefit charge, we need to then regroup, figure out cuts, because if they're not going to support the benefit charge, which is no additional funds, what does that mean for our other revenue streams moving down the road? It changes the dynamics a lot, right? And so to be honest, I think that's, I mean, if we're doing a 10-year levy, I think or a 10-year benefit charge, I think the risk of them not passing it is not as large as it would be with the permanent for lots of reasons. But if we don't, then we get voters that are saying we're not going to pay more in revenue to the fire service. We then are going to be forced to reduce our cost to meet what the taxpayers are willing to give us. And at the end of the day, if the taxpayers speak and we go ask them and they tell us no, then we regroup and we know what revenue streams we do have and we adjust our expenditures accordingly. And some of that will be reduction in service and those pieces. And that's just the nature of where we are. And if the voters say no, you know, we would make concessions to go do that work and have further conversation about where this goes and those other pieces. So to be candid, if that were to be the case, we'd be sharpening the pencil and figuring out what our new revenue is if the voters tell us no. Yep. And then we would come forward and we have further conversation about what that looks like.
All right. Can I just add though, that I don't think there's a better way to manage that risk. The risk that you're describing is absolutely valid and it exists, but I don't think there's a better plan than what we put in front of you to manage that risk.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Kenny, you have your hand up again?
Yes. Commissioner Rowland brings up a good point looking at the out years. Each of these out years, we have deficits. And so one way or another, we're going to have to raise taxes to meet that, whether that's bank capacity, increased EMS levy, increased fire levy, increased fire benefit charge, one way or another to meet that. The only other solution is to cut services. And part of it over this number of years is dependent on the voters approving various measures. And if they don't, the nice thing about that is they're our bosses. If they tell us they don't want to fund us to at all or to a certain degree, then we'll have to make cuts. The nice thing historically that we have had is that we have not failed a levy or other measure we've put to the voters anytime in the last 20 plus years. That doesn't mean that we couldn't. It's just we have been good stewards of the people's resources and providing good service, which I think has a real tangible benefit to the community, and we have community support. But we could lose that at any time. But this dynamic is nothing new. We have consistently faced this where because our costs are going up, our expenses are going up quicker than our revenues are. And so we have in the past consistently had to go back to the people at different times asking for their support, and we will have to in the future. And it's in my opinion, it's a good thing. It just is. And so we will need those revenues to close the gap and fund everything. I did want to, and Mr. Bothwell noted it, if we lose the fire benefit charge for some reason, it's not approved, we do spring back and get the extra 50 cents in the fire levy. So it goes from $1 back to $1.50. Although, as Chief Eastman mentioned, we would have to get a levy lid lift to move it from where it is currently, or currently at the time, to the $1.50. So there is a remedy there, but it's another remedy that takes a vote. So we kind of never get away from that. Personally, I don't think that's a bad thing, but it kind of is what it is for this for our government agency. Obviously this is challenges. Obviously, we're creating a plan to try and deal with it. And somebody from the outside could say, look, you're looking at deficits as far as the eye can see. And that's true. But this conversation here tonight is part of developing a plan to get rid of those deficits. It's just going to happen in one way or another, tax increases, because our expenses are running higher than our revenue. So we'll figure it out as time goes along, and it'll be in conjunction with the support of the voters. And if they like the service that we're providing at the amount of tax dollars that we're taking from them for that purpose, they'll support us. And if they don't, then they won't, and we'll have to deal with it at that time.
Vice Chair Rowland.
Thank you. I think my concern is with 2027, if we're using bank capacity to make up that shortfall in 2025 and 2026, effectively what the voters are going to see is a tax increase, another tax increase, and then we're going to them asking for a tax increase. And my thought process on that is benefits charges is something that is under our control, and a very small amount added to the benefits charge now. Yes, there is a risk with going back to them with 10-year benefits charge after we raise it, let's say $10. Let's just throw a number out there. Average homeowner pays $10 more a year on the benefits charge. And that now we don't have to get into our bank capacity, or at least we don't have to get into it quite as deep as we go along. I think that would make the 2027 lift a little bit more palatable than going through and doing it. I mean, we could, I guess is the plan then to pass the 2024 benefits charge extension and use benefits charge to shoulder the burden of the bulk of the.
So it's kind of wide open. So what the plan does is it preserves the options that we currently have and gives us the opportunity to do whatever revenue mix we currently have and to kind of balance it the way that you all see fit when we bring the budgets forward. So the thing I want to emphasize about the plan tonight, and I think this might speak to Commissioner Kenny's earlier comment too about the 20% degradation issue or principle. This doesn't take away any of your future decision making. We aren't attempting to commit you or commit the future board or this board to any future action. This is really just gives us an idea of how to forecast this and when to say, hey, like raise our hands, hey board, it's time for us to do this. And what you can tell from the timeline for 2024 is these dates are coming up really, really quickly, right? If we want to go do a permanent or a 10-year benefit charge in 2024, we have to start talking about it, in like February. So that's just a few months away. And so we don't want to miss the opportunity to do that. But I just want to emphasize the fact that this doesn't mean you have to do anything into the future. It just gives us an idea of the direction that we think we're going to go. But you'll always have every budget. You're going to have an idea. You're going to have all the tools you currently have, and you get to kind of decide what that revenue mix looks like. So if you want to preserve the bank capacity next year with the 2025 levy and the benefit charges sitting there, and that seems like a better option, then we can fund the part of that deficit with that or whatever it looks like. But those are decisions that'll come into the future. This will just give us an idea of well it'll preserve the options that we currently have, But it'll also give us an idea of what direction the board wants us to take in terms of forecasting and funding the organization.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Teofleck.
Do most organizations have bank capacity? Because I feel like most organizations would be taxing as much as they could. And we're kind of unique in that we're not taxing as much as we can.
It's pretty rare.
So we
If they
are,
have, generally, if the cities I've worked for, they'll go, oh, it's a recession. Like, we're not going to we're not going to take the 1% limit this year. So we're going to bank that, but it's tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've never worked in an organization that had $7.5 million of bank capacity.
So right now, the city of Mill Creek, city of Mountain Lake Terrace next year, and city of Linwood all have bank capacity as a result of becoming part of the RFA. Right, because they all reduced what their property tax, how much they were collecting property tax, and that becomes bank. So similar to us, we changed our tax structure, we have bank capacity. So there are some cities that have it now as a result of annexing into the RFA. As a result of that specific action and what they did, as a result of a decision the city made. So our partner cities that have annexed in, have bank capacity, which is not normal, but in this case, they do, as a result of the action they took annexing in.
so I think we are, like you said, good stewards of our money. Because we have the authority to take more if we wanted, and we're not. So.
Thank you. All right. Commissioner Kenny, earlier you commented about being a $2 organization. That was, I assume, before the fire benefit charge. And that was where the EMS levy was 50 cents and the fire levy was $1.50. Was that what you were referring to before? Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. No, you made that statement and it stuck in my ear. And then we start talking about the levy rates and like, wait, there's a correlation. So I just wanted to confirm that. So then as it stands today, we could go up to 50 cents on the EMS, $1 on the fire levy. So that puts us at $1.50. And currently the fire benefit charge, what are we looking at today?
In terms of value,
Yes.
about $7.7 million.
I'm sorry, when we're looking at the in comparison to the other levies, are we looking
Like,
at?
what's the equivalent to a levy
Yeah,
rate?
yes, please.
Give me 1 second. It is about 13 cents.
Okay. So that puts us at $1.63, which is still short of that $2.
Well, we're not levying the max for.
Right.
Okay.
Right. No, I understand that. I'm just trying to pencil out and understand that. So we're still shortchanging ourselves of that. So if we took that fire benefit charge all the way up to 50 cents, that'd put us to $2, right?
Mhm.
So, but we've got that gap in there that we've been working with.
Yeah, the equivalent right now is $1.26. That's in the chief's proposal. So
Thank you very much. That's all I was really looking for. Any other commissioners, liaison? Okay. On to
So-
item. What?
sure. Before we move on.
Yeah.
Is the board agreeable to seeing this come back? I think staff is very interested in making sure that this moves forward in either in this form or in some other form. And just in terms of next steps, is the board comfortable with us coming back with basically the plan that's here for a vote? Or do we want to bring it back for more discussion? What are the next steps on this topic as far as you all are concerned?
Commissioners? Commissioner Teofla?
Like I said, I'm comfortable with this option of the 2024 10-year benefit charge renewal and the 2027 EMS levy renewal.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kenny, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Bothwell, I wasn't sure. One of your slides put the capital bond in 2026. We haven't talked anything about that tonight. And there's, I think, a lot to talk about related to that. Are you intending that to be part of what you're bringing back to the board? Because if so, I think we need more conversation.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we added that back in because the board was interested in it last time we talked about this. I think that our primary objective, or the thing we'd like to walk away with, is operations funding. There's a lot of work. I mean, to your point, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we know exactly what the capital, what that's going to look like. And so I did have that in the slide that was adding it back in 2026 because that's a suitable election cycle. But there's also the slide that said what we were going to be doing by year. We have kind of a gap here in 2025 where there isn't any activity, any specific activity associated with this plan. And that would be to figure out what is the capital, what are we actually going to voters with, and do we want to pursue that? And so that would be 2025. So I guess from staff's perspective, we'd love to see capital in there. But it's, again, we're not committing the board to any kind of future action, but certainly in 2025, we acknowledge that there's a ton of conversations that are going to need to happen about what that capital, ask to voters would actually look like. And so I guess and I don't want to speak for the rest of the folks up here, but like from my perspective, we really need to shore up the operations funding issue. So if we pull capital back out, would that be a plan that you all agree with? Do you want to see it in there? Is the flexibility and the planning that's going to happen in advance of that okay? I mean, I think it's really important for staff, just in terms of going into the next budget cycle in 2025, that we don't miss the opportunity to in 2024 that we have to renew the benefit charge, or if you want to do something different, go for a levy lid lift on the EMS levy or something like that, that we explore those options and that we start to kind of get traction and agree where we're going with that. And so that's just from my perspective, that's kind of the thing we need to get out of this effort.
Well, Mr. Bothwell, I guess it kind of depends on what you were trying to do, because the capital bond involves a lot of moving parts.
Mhm.
And it involves massive dollars of a magnitude we've never seen here before at the Board of Commissioners. So I don't want to just back into or slide into that, oh, suddenly it appears on our calendar. Because Mr. Bothwell, I know how much you love your calendars, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But I also don't want to get it on the calendar and suddenly, it's used as a sword against me of, oh yeah, 2026 bond. And oh, by the way, that's $250 million. It's like, well, there's a lot to think about before we put that on the calendar. So I don't want to just put it on. I'm okay with your idea of bifurcating it essentially and saying, well, okay, this is the operations calendar, and separately we're going to have a capital calendar, and we're going to come and talk some more about that. But I do think there is some more to talk about regarding capital bond. I'm not saying 2026 is necessarily bad, but I just think there's more to talk about there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that the thing that I would just emphasize is that we don't really have the time to sort out those details before we have to start acting on the rest of the plan. So my recommendation would be to table that until maybe after budget cycle, and then start to pick up the CFP and do the planning on that separately. But in the meantime, talk about operations funding and kind of pursue this plan or adjustments to this plan if that's what you want, but have a plan in place so we know what we're doing in 2024. If the board's agreeable to that, then we would take that piece back out, and that would I think satisfy the immediate need that we have.
You good with that, Commissioner Kenny?
Yeah, that sounds like a
Okay.
plan.
All right, Commissioner Lawrence, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm good with that plan too.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Vice Chair Rowland?
Just one last question, hopefully. Are there any regional fire authorities or fire districts in this state that have passed a permanent benefits charge?
I'd have to research it.
I think only one that I'm aware of, Leslie, is. I think there's only one, but I can't remember who that is. I know the legislation's very new for doing that, and I believe there's only one, and I don't have any of that information off the top of my head.
Is there a particular reason why we don't even want to consider bringing that in 2024 and a 10-year in 2025?
So I can tell you during the conversation we had at the workshop on the Friday workshop.
It's been a while, so
Nope, on the Friday workshop is when you add permanent to a ballot measure, it puts up red flags because it's permanent. And we do know that there are folks that understand that the benefit charge is annually set at the board, and it can go to 60% of your operating budget. And if we go permanent, it requires a 60% vote. And when we talked on
That's right.
at
All
the
right.
work session that they're, you know, the potential of opposition and not maintaining and getting the 6% vote was real or a concern. And because we're at where we are with funding, we
Thank you.
needed to go down a different path as a result.
Cool. Thank you for refreshing my memory. Sorry.
Anyone else? Thank you, CFO Bothwell.
Thank you.
All right, now we're on to item 10D with the body armor. With DC Curtis.
Good evening, Chair, Board and liaisons and staff. I'm here before you this evening to bring a request for an agenda bill request on purchase and procurement of 42 sets of body armor, totaling $84,000 and $84,642. This was sourced through a cooperative purchasing agreement, commonly known as NASPO, and was supported in the 2023 budget under equipment replacement. And this will get us to the status that we need to fully outfit or continue to fully outfit our on-duty staff and start to provide appropriate body armor for auxiliary and support personnel. I'm here to answer any questions if the board has any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chief Curtis. Commissioner Kenny.
Thank you, Chief Curtis. I want to say it was 2 years ago, but you know, my memory might be failing me and it might be 3, that the board first authorized the purchase of body armor. And I want to say in a similar number, 40 something. So can you tell me how many sets of body armor do we have now before this purchase? And you know, how are they kind of like divvied out?
Yes, Commissioner. I think that's an excellent question. And unfortunately, I have to apologize. I don't have the exact number. Some of these actions preceded me in the logistics division. I will get you that number, but I believe we have well over 100 sets in the street today. And those are distributed based on staffing levels at the stations. It's managed by operational personnel. We have an individual that manages that program, one of our battalion chiefs. And we have also had to manage different sized individuals and provide them the best coverage that we can. So over the years, we've discovered that we have increased staffing and that we have continued to keep up with that. And distribution will also augment and support some of our additional station, for example, Station 76 and upstaffed. So we are doing our due diligence to make sure that each piece is accounted for. Unfortunately, I don't have my laptop in front of me right now where I could go into Operative IQ and give you an exact dollar or exact number. We are going through an inventory process right now, so those that number will be at my fingertips within a few weeks.
At the time we originally approved the purchase of body armor 2-3 years ago, we did it with the understanding that it was going to be essentially used for on-duty staff. So like Station 13 with 3 people assigned to it, there'd be 3 sets of body armor. They would essentially change each day to the next crew that came on board. Those 3 sets would be, you know, essentially go with the units. But I'm sensing with over 100 currently and 42 more on this purchase, we're moving towards body armor, like maybe protective equipment assigned to the individual. And because we don't have, you know, with 42 more, that'd be like 142 sets. We don't have 142 sets of people on duty at a particular time. So I'm kind of thinking about, so what's the plan regarding the body armor?
Yes, Commissioner, you bring up an excellent point. I can assure you that my intention is not to assign individual sets at this point. That's a conversation that's far exceeds my capacity and would be a board-driven decision. That is not our intent. We have some some movement of the body armor based on duty staffing. I want to say, correct me, Chief, how many is our minimum staffing daily? 70? 70. We have 70 individuals on duty, and that brings up logistical challenges. So you are correct. We do have body armor assigned to stations as well as apparatus. And when you have 70 folks on duty, there are logistical challenges, and there has to be a little bit of flexibility built in, and that's what we're trying to obtain. In addition, through training, for example, the recent active shooter drill, some of the support staff don't have body armor, or they have the really old, very heavy, like I have in the trunk of my car. It's just not conducive for modern application, and it's pretty much at the end of its life. So we are trying to retire some sets, and then we're trying to augment exactly what we have in the field. I assure you, our intentions are not to start individually assigning sets, because then we'd have to have 300.
Well, actually, I just wanted to, we haven't talked about body armor in a while. And so I just kind of wanted an update on where we stood. I'm actually not opposed to the idea of individualized body armor for all employees. When you come on board, in addition to, your various uniforms and your boots, you also get a set of body armor. That's the nature of the modern world that we're working with. And, we're a suburban area, but we've got some urban issues, and that's just part of it. Obviously that's more expensive, but making sure that our employees are protected from the most aggressive people out there. And you can get attacked quickly. People don't realize how quickly crimes, including assaults, happen. They can happen really fast. And so just having that for the right circumstances, that might be a route to go. I'm not saying yes to that, but I definitely don't want you to hear a no to that. I'm just curious, how are we actually doing that? Because we're now a few years into body armor. I'm assuming you're getting a better sense of how does it work? Maybe one or two sets have gone missing, etc. I just know how that much equipment gets handled. Body armor is particularly sensitive. It might have some significant resale value on the black market. So it's an interesting piece of equipment for us, a necessary piece, but just something that personally I'd like to hear from time to time, because I think when most people think of the fire service, they don't think of body armor. They think of that for the police department, but we're working with folks that are, can be at times a danger to us, and we need to protect ourselves.
Yes, Commissioner, you bring up an excellent point about the attractiveness of the body armor for a ill-willed individual per se. We have that on a daily rig check for the crews. We are maintaining it, and you're very perceptive, because there were 2 sets missing most recently. However, we've tracked those down, and it had to do with just misplacement. So we are trending in a positive direction. I appreciate your support. I appreciate the board's support. And I want to tell you guys that I'm still on that learning curve as a logistics chief. This recently came into my responsibilities just recently, and I had to do a lot of catch up to learn about body armor. And this is a good example of the benefits of having a logistics division. It allowed operations to refocus from purchasing onto their duties of delivering service.
Thank you.
Liaison Swisher.
Well, as somebody who does help to outfit body armor for police officers, our officers are actually all fitted individually. Their body armor is designed to fit them. A perfect example is our most recent officer that was brought on board. She's about as big as a minute. Even our smallest officer that we had prior held up her body armor in front of her, and she would have worn it like a crop top, because that person is so small. So trying to outfit your crews, you're gonna need a wide range, because I've seen on the nights with the commish, some of your different officers that come in here, and one set of body armor does not fit all. And then, of course, they also have the 5-year warranty expiration on them. That our officers over the years, when they hit that, have held on to them 4 times. If they were in a position where there could potentially be someone firing at their vehicle or something, they can hang them through a window. It's not perfect, but it does give them that added bit of protection. But body armor, eventually you probably will have to get more sets than you think are necessary right now in order to make sure that they fit all of your people properly and actually give them the protection you're trying to afford them.
Think your liaison Swisher, your statement about hanging the body armor in the window reminded me of when I did a ride along with the LAPD, and they told me that if there was a problem, just to duck down below the windows because the doors are bulletproof. So, Vice Chair Rowland.
What's the protocol for when these are used?
So we have so the crews can do it whenever they feel like it. But what we're doing now is when we get dispatched to scenes of violence, there's a specific alert that goes out with it. And so that alerts our crews to put the protective equipment on prior to leaving the station. So if dispatch gets, there's several mechanisms in play. The goal being is that the crews, if they're going to a scene of violence, get notified before they're dispatched, and they put on the body armor prior to getting in the rig and get dispatched en route. And so that's the goal, is to let them know that. And there's been some dispatch changes that make sure they're alerted to that. And obviously if they get there and realize they got dispatched of something, captain then slows things down and gets the body armor before they go. So there's a couple different ways it works, but we've got dispatch now and some specific alerts for the crews so they know. And they're audible alerts. It's obvious when they're going to a call like that to alert them to put appropriate PPE on prior to getting en route. James, you got something to add to that?
For these calls, when they get on scene, is there always going to be police there as well? Or are we getting dispatched out to scenes where we're getting told, put on body armor, but there aren't police there when we get there?
Law enforcement that they would stage. So those are coordinated responses with us and law enforcement. In that kind of scenario, if they're going to, assault with a weapon and stuff, law enforcement's part of that. And scenes of violence dispatch that will let us know law's not on scene, stage before you get there. The goal is never to have us go into a position, put our crews in that spot without law enforcement clearing the scene prior to us getting there. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, right? You roll up and with all the best of knowing what we know, crews do get themselves in a spot where they have to back out. But most of the time, those calls have law enforcement either already there or going, and we're told to stage prior to us arriving.
Most recently, our crews participated in the regional drill out at Snohomish. I forget the exact location in Snohomish, and I unfortunately couldn't be there. But the feedback that I got about body armor, it was very instrumental as these crews form what are called RTFs, or Rescue Task Forces. And they are a key component along with law enforcement. Gone are the days of sitting back on, say, an active shooter at a school and waiting for a SWAT team to clear the building. We are moving our people into forward positions to retrieve the wounded and actually start bringing them out and starting care. So as our crews were at the drill in their RTF setups, it was noted and fed back to me that there were a lot of agencies that we border with in Snohomish County that were not properly equipped for those scenarios. We were very proud to say that all of our members from South County Fire, with your support, were properly equipped, properly identified, and that's because of having the proper body armor on the units and accounting for it throughout the life of those purchases. So I want to say thank you to the board. And it was very successful from our perspective.
When was the initial batch purchased? I know Commissioner
I
Kenny,
want to say it was 3 years ago.
about 3 years ago.
I think there was some purchase before that, because I think I've got a set that the crew's no longer wearing my rig. We don't want to wear that either. That's was one of the original, I don't know, we ordered I think we had sets originally that were on the BC rigs that were given out. It was like 15 of them, 5 per BC rig. And I think those have been put out of service. And I want to say, Commissioner Kenny, did we have those prior to the beginning of the pandemic? I think we had body armor before the pandemic. So 4 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. The first sets, 5, maybe a little bit before that. And those are the ones that are out and folks like me get, because the reason is they're still serviceable. They're just bulky. They're different, right? The technology's changed. They're lighter. They're more mobility for the folks that are actually doing what James just talked about. And so I want to say it's been 5 or 6 years, and realizing they do have a shelf life. And, you know, we're trying to also get to a place where we're not buying wholesale all at the same time, right? We're doing it in small batches and stuff, but it's been 5, 6 years, since we've had them within just very small quantities that were on BC rigs and would give them to the crews. We've graduated to the crews having a set. And now we're graduating to making sure we have the appropriate size at all the stations. So everybody has an appropriately sized, set of body armor to wear, rather than put somebody who's wearing this, you know, either too small or too big. So that's a rough timeline of when it all started.
Okay, but is there anything else?
No, sir, I just appreciate the opportunity to expand on our request.
So, I'm noticing here that, these are level 3 body armor. So I don't know how familiar everyone is with, body armor. Level 2A is the first level for some odd reason. There is no level 1. I guess that's your shirt. But 3A, is the last level. They cover 2A. There's 2 something. I think it's 2A, 2, 3A, and then 3. And 3 is for rifle rounds. It's the first one that protects against rifle rounds, specifically because it has these ceramic plates that are put in it. As I look at this, I see that there are ceramic plates for all 42. Do you think that's necessary? Or I guess, are we going to be sending all 42 people into?
Here's the challenge: is you don't know who's going.
But these are
Right.
universal plate sizes, right? 10-inch by 12-inch, according to the quote here.
Yeah, I can't speak for that piece. I would assume if what you're saying is, can we buy less sets of, just have enough plates and then have people take a plate out of one size and put another size to do that? I guess that's not how I would recommend you do it. I think if you have 42 sets, you have 42 sets. And for us, you keep them all intact, and I wouldn't go down the path of changing plates, in my opinion. I wouldn't
totally
do that.
understand the need for 3A for all handgun rounds. A situation where you have someone with a rifle, completely different situation, much more rare, though it does happen. We've had it happen in our communities, but we're not sending everyone into these, I will call them like extreme situations compared to somebody has a gun on them, or you're going into a domestic dispute, something like that. My thought process here is that before the BCs were carrying the body armor, now we're, equipping them. It makes more sense to me for these ceramic plates, since they are, as far as I can tell, one size fits all. They're, same size for your chest. I understand body armor itself is different sizes to accommodate, but the plates themselves aren't. That we would have a smaller amount of those for those situations that the BC would have on them. In case of we had to go into one of these situations where it's a rifle round. Otherwise, they're completely covered for all handguns without these plates.
I think that's the problem. I don't know if we always know, right? I mean, to be honest, the 3 times that I've been in that scenario, none of them were handguns. They're all rifles. Personal experience, right? These weren't active shooter scenarios. These were me walking up the front door, realizing I was in a place I shouldn't have belonged. And it wasn't a handgun, it was a rifle. So I guess my argument back is based on what we do and what James was talking about, the active shooter, our folks are wearing body armor on all sorts of scenes of violence, right? So we don't actually know. And when we get there, nobody knows what we're dealing with when we do it. And so I guess I lean on the fact that everybody has the same, all our gear is the same. And we don't move around stuff, because what inadvertently will happen is somebody will miss it or not do it. And you end up having somebody that doesn't have the appropriate protection because of how we've set it up. And it's a point of failure. Right. And so I wouldn't recommend that. And I wouldn't want that to be for our organization right now. As a result of, we're talking about things that, one, when we go in these scenarios, they're very high risk, they're very fast moving. And if we went down that path, Commissioner Rowling, you're putting our folks in a spot where they have to go, do I have my plates or do I not? And it's a point of failure that puts our, in my opinion, probably not where we want to be.
Didn't you already say that when we get toned out for these, where they would be grabbing them off the wall, that
Yes,
that there's a law enforcement presence already there to clear the scene, right?
most of the time, yes.
Most of the time. So we're getting toned out. There's law enforcement on site. We're going into a situation that law enforcement, and
There's still risks though.
I understand that. But what I'm saying is that it's kind of, it's a little bit more nuanced than just they're grabbing these things off. Do they always have the ceramic plates in them every single time?
They're not
Are
really,
they,
they're
because
in
they
them
are
all the,
inserts, and I know different organizations have
yeah,
different
for
policies.
us, no, they're in them.
Okay.
They're never, those inserts are not removed. They're in them and they wear them. It doesn't matter the event.
All right.
Right. So we don't, maybe I should have started there. They all have it in. They don't take them off based on what they're going. They have the highest protection going in
Gotcha.
that we have. Right. So we don't take it out, and maybe that answers, that probably would have answered the question.
That would have answered
minutes
the
ago.
question a lot sooner, I think, because like I said, there's different protocols for these things, and understanding when you're purchasing these, if you're throwing in all these things that are going to sit on a shelf and only be brought out when they're scenes, that's different than if they're always going to be wearing them, because it does make it a lot bulkier for them to wear them, a lot more comfortable. They can't move around quite as easy with these plates in them. They're heavier, all these things. So understanding the protocol was kind of my intent from the beginning. I want to make sure that everyone's protected. I just want to make sure that if we have stuff, we're being used. So thank you.
Commissioner Fernhoff, you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Paula, for your comments about sizing. I think one of the things that, and it would be nice to have an example, right? If we kind of get down into the weeds on this, and maybe this is something that Chief, you could provide us in the future, but plate carriers is what they're called, are different than a standard police officer's vest, which has to be sized. They wear it all the time. I wear a vest when I'm not doing this job. I do other jobs, and that vest is custom fit to my body, but it's also a soft carrier. Meaning it has very flexible material in it. And the level 3A, the A, at least for my vest, addresses both stab and slash capabilities in addition to rifle and that kind of thing. So what we have here is basically it's a combat setup, and you'll notice even in the quote here, there's something called Mitch. That's the helmet, right? That's what we're also ordering in this bundle. So it's not just a vest, it's the plates that go into the vest. The vests are very open up here, and that's so they can accommodate different dynamic body types. And then you also have a ballistic helmet that goes with your package. So it's the number might look a little large, but actually that's a pretty good deal considering I know what these things cost. And when you get it and you're right, we're writing on a contract, right? We're state or somebody.
Yeah, we worked with our supplier, and they were able to quote us based on a cooperative purchasing, nationwide cooperative purchasing program. And the original request back in for the 2023 budget was 30 sets at $90,000.
Yeah.
We were able to get 42 sets for $85,000, and that includes tax. So, our purchasing and procurement department did an exceptional job overseeing this request. So I'm proud to say that we were able to get more for our dollar.
I think my only last comment will be, as somebody who has worn a vest, and the reason why I choose to wear a vest is because you don't know when things will go sideways. And it's typical when you need the vest, it's too late to go get the vest. So that might be one, and Bob, you know this from your experience. It's one of those observations I've asked crews, how often have you deployed your body armor? And I won't say what the answers were, but I'll say that I wish they deploy it more. And in a proactive sense. And it can be as simple as I'm going into this geographic area, which is known to have hotspots. Maybe we should level up proactively without law enforcement holding our hand and telling us when it's time to put on a vest. I'd rather see some initiative out there that says it's okay to do so. I don't know what the SOG reads, but I think it's at officer's discretion, I would imagine, right? Company officer's discretion.
I would have to review it to give you a definitive answer, but I believe you're accurate.
And I have to agree with Commissioner Kenny. He nailed it right on the head. And then he's talking about times have changed. And usually when things go bad, they go bad fast. So that's my only 2 cents in the matter.
Thank you, Commissioner Furnoff. Vice Chair Rowland.
Just one last question. Standard uniform right now, we're not using the Class Bs. We're just using the South County Fire T-shirts. Once these pieces of body armor are on, they're wearing them over top of their T-shirts, I'm assuming.
Yes, that's correct.
Is there anything on them that identifies them as not law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so through training and experience in the field, we identified that it was hard to identify our crews and differentiate which crews. So we went with a common title of SCF for South County Fire, obviously, and then we identified each unit specifically by its apparatus ID number. We moved away from anything that's blank or anything that just says EMS or fire. We are readily identifiable with that tag, and then law enforcement obviously has police or sheriff's department or something along those lines.
So is the thought that would help us from the sheriff's department thinking that we were bad actors, or that bad actors would see SCF and understand that we're not the police?
Well, ideally, we should never find ourselves in that situation
Agreed.
in a hot zone per se.
Agreed.
We were having trouble differentiating between law enforcement and fire personnel. And we were having difficulty differentiating between, let's say, engine 11 and engine 12 or ladder 10. So we had to come up with a unique way of identifying. And this was a suggestion that came from law enforcement through our representatives, our liaisons that work closely with law enforcement officials. And this was a suggestion that came out of perhaps one of our CCTA events when we participated in, say, South King County, Seattle, or Tacoma.
All right.
If you were a ways away, you would have a hard time telling between in the team who was fire and who was law. I mean, just to be honest, depending on what the colors they wear. If you look at my colors, they're dark blue. It's a black helmet. In other words, if you're saying, are we like wearing bright orange? No, we have identifiers where the agencies know who we are, and within the teams, they know who's law and who's fire. So there's no misunderstanding of fires. If law wants law people, they know who to talk to and they can identify that clearly. But if you're talking about, if you're looking from the backside, and unless you know engine 20s, you may not know, just as a result of the nature of that kind of thing. If that's where we're going.
Yeah, my thought is you talk about battlefield, and some of these people or some of our firefighters are wearing these electively. So if they're rolling up to a scene and heading up to a door, and somebody sees somebody in body armor outside, no matter what letters are on the back of it, in a theater of war, you sometimes have UN peacekeepers who wear blue helmets. You have Red Cross, and they'll be wearing they're not going in wearing camo, but essentially by wearing these black vests, we are. I don't know. It's nothing to hold this up, but if you guys have looked into other color options, just again, it makes it so it doesn't look like some body armor everybody associates with black. And I'm concerned we don't have logos on it. We don't have any, I'm not asking for logos, but just options there, so that if people are wearing them electively, that they're not getting mistaken for police officers. And
yeah, I don't have great answers for that, but
I can say that we can explore helmet covers that are colored or something like that. I'm not the subject matter expert per se, but I will take your.
Yeah, I don't think
concerns
it's so
back.
much the helmets, because I'm gonna guess that them putting on a vest without a helmet is much more common than them putting on the helmet. Right. So again, it's that elective use. You're jumping out of the back of, a vehicle with flashing lights. Just a thought.
Can I tag in
Sure.
there?
Liaison switcher, go ahead.
I know that for most of our police officers, and it's gone back and forth, that the writing on their body armor and on any of their stuff that identifies them as police is either white or gold. If you somehow could come up with red, that would make you guys stand out more. I don't know if it's an option. Just throwing that out there, because I know that our guys have been gold and have been white. So
Terrific advice. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for indulging me.
I know that I've done a number of ride-alongs with law enforcement, largely here in Snohomish and King counties, and a couple places in southern Los Angeles. And the only place I've had to wear body armor when I've gone out is Snohomish County Sheriff's Department. It's been an experience wearing that, and my day job, I don't have to worry about that. I'm all for making sure that our people, our personnel are properly protected, making sure that they don't have to worry about switching out the plates and so forth. It just needs to be grab and go. I recognize also that we have many different body types, and so we have to have multiple to choose from at each of our 15 stations. So I get that. So I'm all for this request. So with that being said, like to entertain a motion for the board to approve the purchase of 42 sets of body armor for $84,642.
So moved.
Moved by Vice Chair Rowland, seconded by Commissioner Kenny. All those in
Yes.
favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
And it is 8:27, and let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. And we'll come back and talk about the brush truck at 8:37. All right, let's go to item 10E, the brush truck.
Good evening again, board chair, board and liaison and guests and staff. I'm before you once again to ask for your approval, consideration and approval on the sourcing procurement under a sole source resolution for the purchase of a $250,000 brush truck. We are asking for, with expenses and exercising options, $270,432 for one Rebel Strike brush truck, with those approval of options. And I'm here to answer any questions, take any comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Kenny, you have your hand up.
Yes, Chief Curtis, I see sole source purchase, and Commissioner Chan is not with us tonight, but he's always very interested in sole source circumstances. I guess I am concerned that this is another sole source purchase in the context of apparatus. Now we're drifting back a few years. We had to do sole source for Pierce fire engines because they are the greatest. But recently I noticed that because of supply chain issues, we no longer need to sole source Pierce fire engines. We're happy, I think, with another brand. I want to say Spartan. So makes me wonder about sole sourcing. But really the issue is we do this to get around for significant purchases over $100,000, getting around going out to bid. In this case, I'm not saying that, but rather we change the qualifications of the bid to say, well, we need it really fast. So only our favorite provider can provide it. So there's different ways to get there. In the end, we end up with sole source. And so that is just one of the concerns that I keep my eye out, because We seem to have a tendency to do that. And, you know, the law calls for us as a government entity procuring large items to go to bid on this stuff. And to the extent that we try to avoid that by getting around it with various qualifications, or we just gotta have our favorite provider, we're really not following through on either the letter or spirit of that. So I'm just raising that issue because I saw that in this and am concerned about it. But I kind of have a broader concern as that sole sourcing applies to other things that we do. I was just curious if you had any comment in response.
Sure, and I appreciate your comments, your insight, and I'd like to address that in the sense that we have a team of firefighters that are wildland trained individuals that work under the direction of one of our captains. And we went to our captain, I want to say right after I came into the logistics division back in March, April. And this was one of our pressing issues is, are we going to be able to procure a brush truck and meet with the agency's wishes and the board's directive to procure a unit and get it in service for the 2023 brush season. So what we did was we looked at used apparatus. And we continued in the interest of transparency and respect to the board. We wanted you guys to know of everything that we're doing along the way. And we looked at used apparatus. We called neighboring jurisdictions to see if they had anything available. And really, quite honestly, we ran into a dead end. We then said, okay, what can we do and how can we build a brush unit in short order and maybe get into the tail end of the brush season and support those members that are out there, not only providing wildland response to us, but if they are called outside of the geographic area. And that also didn't pan out because we found ourselves running up against supply chain shortages, specifically with the chassis. And as you may recall, that bleeds over to our medic units as well. And we've had that back and forth with our medic units. Hey, we're buying van chassis. Hey, we're buying truck chassis. Hey, we're buying van chassis, all because of the uncertainty of the supply chain. But to answer your question specifically as to why are we doing sole source, why are we asking for this resolution? It's because of those timelines. I personally contacted each and every manufacturer that I could find, and I have a list of them, and I'm more than willing to share that now or after the meeting, but who we talked to and why we needed to go this direction. I have dates all the way from, excuse me while I try to find my correct note here, from 12 to 32 months on build times. One manufacturer stood out, and this is the one where they said, hey, you know what? We anticipated the issues with chassis, so we secured these chassis early on, and they quoted us a 6 to 8 month build time. For us, that was excellent news because I was starting to feel, and the team was starting to feel, that we're failing the board's expectations. And so we said, how do we get moving forward in short order? So we took this to legal and we said, hey, this is the situation we're in. And legal's advice was, well, is it a build time issue? Is it a manufacturer that you're happy with? We would suggest you guys consider sole source. So that's what we did. And we were hopeful that as we brought this to the board, that we could bring it to the board in such a fashion that says, hey, you know what? I've been here several times before you trying to tell you I'm working as hard as we can. The team's working as hard as we can. But unfortunately, we have these challenges that keep jumping up in front of us. So that's why we went the sole source route. We felt that sole source provided us a lot of options in the sense that they were a dependable manufacturer. We had, we already had experience working with them, and they were able to meet our needs in a short time frame. It's as simple as that. If we go out to bid, we're looking at probably a 2-month process to advertise, bid, and award. Then we may find ourselves with a manufacturer that meets the spec, meets the expectations. However, they may have a long build time. And we're fearful that if we go out for a request for proposal and we say, hey, we want this built in 6 months or less, we don't know that we're going to get anybody that's going to respond to that RFP request or that invitation to bid. So that's the why behind it. In the interest of transparency, that is why we kept keeping the board updated. I was very disappointed with the process, not on anyone's actions here at South County Fire, but just what's going on with the industry. It's not as simple as it was years ago when I was a captain before you saying, hey, we're buying a fire engine. You could just point and anyone would build it for you, or a brush truck. It's a very different playing field out there today, and it changes day by day. I hope that answers your question, Commissioner Kenny. And I
It does. That's good enough for tonight. I think you understand my concern on sole source. I do have a follow-up question though for you. Did this because I thought I saw a picture of it from this past summer, but did we have Fire District, Snohomish County Fire District 22 Getchell, did we have one of their brush trucks on loan to us this past summer and or currently?
We do. We have an agreement in place with I don't think it's an ILA. I think it's just a interagency agreement to staff their brush truck, and they will lend it to us. And in exchange, we provide the staffing, and they are able to bill for the billable hours through the state mode plan if it goes out.
And that's actually located at one of our fire stations currently.
Correct.
Station 11, sir.
And is that does that terminate here in the fall, or does that continue on into 2024?
You know what, Commissioner Kenny, I gotta go find out. I don't think it stops unless Chief Hotz wants the rig back. I think it was to continue until they didn't want to continue anymore. So my expectation is it's going to continue, but I can get clarification on that. I'm not sure, and I haven't been part of those dialogues. That's a Chief Hovis and Chief Hotz conversation.
Well, that's my understanding too. So if it's different, if it does like actually terminate, I would enjoy knowing that. But otherwise, that was my assumption too from the past, is that it continues on. Great. Thank you.
I think when we looked at this, what was the ballpark average price of one of these trucks?
About $250,000 was the ask. And this particular request exercises an option on there as far as initial attack on a brush fire or going direct on a fire where they would have a remote turret and some other equipment. I felt that would be an important safety consideration, and we asked to exercise that option. So 250,000 is the ballpark typically for a brush truck of this caliber, a Type 6.
So you're saying that if we were to go out to bid, all things being equal, the prices would come in the same, but it would be different wait times.
Yeah, not only that. Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but these particular vendor was not necessarily available on Sourcewell or HGAC. However, when we did price comparison, we're right in the same ballpark.
Any other commissioners? Liaison? Okay, with that being said, I entertain a motion to adopt the brand name and sole source resolution 10172023-25 for Rebel Strike and Fire Trucks Unlimited, authorizing staff to sign the Rebel proposal V4 for one brush truck in the amount of $270,432. Is that a motion by Commissioner Lawrence? All right, that's a second by Commissioner Fernahoff. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Kenny, you have your hand up.
Yes. Thank you. So I remain opposed to the purchase of the brush truck, just like I was in the budget last year in 2020, last fall for the 2023 budget. The brush truck is a waste of our taxpayer dollars. We have no need for it. However, it will definitely allow us to subsidize and benefit the residents of Eastern Washington, the state of Oregon, and the state of California, who will use it the most. As we just heard, we already have a brush truck on loan to us from Fire District 22. and has been on loan to us actually for multiple years at this point. We don't actually need a brush truck. We do have some ravines and we do have some fire risk from some wooded areas that we have, but not much in this suburban area. And to the extent that we do, our current fire trucks are more than adequate to provide service. Now, to the extent that they aren't, which is maybe one call a year, the more than 10 brush trucks that exist in eastern and northern Snohomish County and the fire districts are available to assist us, multiple of which are maintained in Snohomish County at any one time. They don't go out on responses to Eastern Washington, to Oregon or California to deplete the number of brush trucks to too low a level in Snohomish County. And so the fire districts in northern and eastern Snohomish County are more than happy, are very happy to assist us on one things that they actually do a lot better than we do, and that is wildland fire and fighting those fires. They're happy to come and assist us. They have in the past. We should rely on them for these resources. We help them with many other things like EMS and other things that they don't do as well on, that we are very capable on as the largest fire district or fire entity in Snohomish County. But that's not good enough for us. We have to have the latest and the greatest. So we have to have our own brush truck. And so that means we'll have 2 brush trucks that won't maybe respond to 1 call per year, but not many. I understand Chief Eastman's probably going to respond in just a minute and say, well, Commissioner Kinney, there were 10 of these that they went out on. Sure, they can go out, but are they really needed? My answer historically is no. And so while the fire risk is generally increasing in Washington, it's really increasing in Eastern Washington, Oregon, and California, where we send all of our units. And so we'll continue to do that, which is really a subsidization of those places. And, Chief Eastman will tell us that, well, we get compensation back for the time that they spend. That's true, but there won't be any compensation for this truck. This comes out of our taxpayers' dollars. We'd be better off putting this money towards something else that can actually be used regularly in South County Fire. And I would just note that where does it end in terms of having to have the latest and the greatest? Because, we don't have any river hovercraft, but some Snohomish County fire districts do, and we have some streams. Maybe we should get one. What about a helicopter? Because those are really handy. What about a second or a third boat? Because you never know how many boat fires you're going to have. I'm being facetious, but where does it end? And with the brush truck, it's a waste of money, but I know that the board is dead set on, and the staff is dead set on getting it. But this is an example of government waste. We should give that $270,000 back to the taxpayer. I'll be voting no. Thank you.
Commissioner Lawrence, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I sort of remember that we actually, when we send it to the California, Oregon, Eastern Washington, we get compensated. And I remember that this thing will actually pay for itself when we rent it out. And are we going to still rent the brush truck we rent now? Do we need to keep that rented? And so like some clarification on that.
I'm going to defer to AC or Interim Chief Eastman on this question because it's an operational decision that exceeds my knowledge right now, and I apologize for that.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure my answer is going to be a lot better, Commissioner Lawrence. I think there's been a lot of conversation about having a resource in South County during the summer months for us to utilize for the urban interface fire risk we have, and then having one of those, which would be what we get from District 22 to be the one that deploys outside the RFA and provides mutual aid, to either, counties outside the Snohomish County. And typically we don't send, I don't think we've sent a type 6, and I could be wrong, out of state. I think typically when we go out of state, it's a type 1 engine. I'm not saying it can't be, So I think right now, based on my recollection, and I haven't been intimately involved in the conversations about where we're going with our wild-land and urban interface capabilities. But I would see us having one that would be deployable with the goal of having one within the region. And it would be a very, 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 very unique circumstance, in my opinion, where they would both go, and we would leave us without a wildland IER type 6 to utilize and use it within the RFA. So I don't know if that answers your question, and not being one that's been part of those conversations operationally, but if I dust the cobwebs off and go back and remember the conversations that, at least from a staff's perspective, we've had, that's how I see it moving forward, is that our current brush truck on loan would continue to be the one that goes outside and assist during wildland season with the resource we're purchasing, for the most part being here to protect and use within the RFA.
Do we have to keep renting the one from Gesell?
Don't rent.
I don't think you rented, do you?
We don't actually exchange any money, Commissioner Lawrence. So we're actually not renting it. Chief Hotz lets us house it here. He maintains it, I think. He maintains it. We're able to staff it and utilize it. But we don't actually pay him any money to have the resource here. The benefit he gets is when it deploys during the summertime, he gets the revenue for the truck. And then we get reimbursed for the personnel. And that's the relationship that we've had to date with him. And so the question is, do we need it? If we have our own rig, we'd have that resource capability within the RFA. I think, one of the reasons we move forward and put this in the budget, so we have the capability within the RFA, not necessarily to send out, and we would continue to use Chief Hotz's resource to be able to do that.
Gotcha. So, so we benefit sometimes. If we needed it, we'd have two on hand, but maybe it's rented out. That benefits Gesell, but sometimes we need it. Maybe we'll need two at one time. But we'll always have the one that we're talking about purchasing, correct?
That's my understanding. And right now, in the seat I'm sitting in, that's how I would do it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe our request and the wildland team's intent is that we will always have one brush truck available in district, and not tie our hands per se and deploy both of them at the same time.
And just from the arguments for the last couple of years about the brush truck, we're seeing longer, drier summers. There are many instances where we've had to use not suitable vehicles to go to put out fires along the freeway or other places. Am I correct in that? My memory serve me right?
Well, I guess I'll say that there are challenging places within the RFA that using an engine versus a Type 6 truck makes it more challenging, and a Type 6 trucks, or what we're talking about with the brush truck, would be a more appropriate vehicle to use to extinguish a fire. Now, with that said, and Commissioner Kenny is right, we've got very, very, very resourceful firefighters in the streets. And if I give them a tool and they need to go solve a task, they will actually go do it. So I will say there are some places within the RFA that an engine won't get to, that a brush truck could get to, and would save us from having to hand jack a whole lot of line and hose to get there. So I think it's a resource. It's a resource that, Commissioner Kenny's correct. We don't need it every day. But the day we do need it, we're really going to want it. And it may be once a year, it may be twice a year, maybe 10 times a year, depending on what happens with the environment and where climate's going in the RFA. But I would also say when you need it, you do.
What happens if there's a fire somewhere in Snohomish County outside of the RFA? And is it be mutual aid thing that they need it? Do we get compensated? Would we get compensated, or just another freebie for the others?
So if it's something that goes within the county, we would send it under automatic aid. And just like if we had an event, we do automatic aid and they'd return the favor and bring back. So we wouldn't be charging for it. But conversely, if we had an event in the RFA that needed those same resources, those that have it would send those resources in our automatic aid and then not charge us for the use of those resources either. Now, the one caveat to that is if we end up getting an event that expands, gets a mission number from the state and becomes a bigger issue where reimbursements authorized, that changes the animal. But to answer your question, no,
Bolt Creek Fire, that would have been one we'd got compensated for.
that's different, right? That's a different fire.
I mean, we would get compensated.
Yeah.
Okay, so how many millions of dollars do we have invested in vehicles now, roughly?
In the fleet as a whole.
We're
Yeah.
all looking at CF Buffalo.
Well, let's just for argument, you've got 22 engines, 3 ladder special units. So you've got 40 million in heavy and say $250,000 for all our ambulances. There's 22 of those. And then staff vehicles that have response capability are about 70,000 to give you a rough idea. So was that 50, 60 million, something like that, 40 to 60 million?
All right. Okay, all right. So, and in your guys' considered opinion, this is something that be prudent and using foresight and knowledge, actually know about these things since you are the professionals. And I'm going to listen to your guys' considered judgment. So you'll have my approval. Because you guys know what you're talking about.
And just a little more thought on this vehicle. As a logistics chief, I've found myself looking at things a little bit differently. This vehicle gives us some abilities that are not necessarily associated with wildland fires. In a snowstorm, it is a 4-wheel drive vehicle and it can be deployed appropriately during windstorms, during floods, during any mudslides or something like that. We would have that additional capability. This is a vehicle that we wouldn't have to worry or rely on a interlocal agreement with another agency to provide for us. We would have that ability and it would be housed at one of our stations. So it'd be readily available. So just some thinking outside the box.
Other uses for it. Very good. Okay. So in your considered opinion, this isn't any kind of waste of public funds.
I wouldn't have necessarily have a strong opinion on that either way. I'm just executing the wishes of the board.
Wait a second.
How was that?
Wait a second. Hey, are you studying to be a politician or something? What's going on?
All right. Point of clarification. What is a recent incident that would have been nice to have the brush truck?
The one that comes to mind most recently, and I don't know if Brush 11 was available for this, but it was northbound I-5. There was a large, fast expanding, it was light fuels, but there was a large brush fire in the Marysville area where we did send I don't recall if it was a strike team or a task force from South County Fire that responded on a zone call out. And that was just this, I want to say that was maybe a month and a half ago. So that would have been a fire that Brush 11 would have been involved in had it been, I don't know why it didn't get dispatched or where it was at the time. I can't speak to that, but I can tell you that we sent several units to that incident, a battalion chief, a couple engines, and we were involved in in that incident with Marysville Fire.
I'm sorry. I was in my mind, it was inside the RFA.
Inside the RFA. Offhand, other than brush fires on the 4th of July, incidental fires, I want to say that this last season was not as was not a high call volume for brush fires as we've seen in the past. We've had multiple acres on I-5 burn. I've personally been on fires that have stretched a mile on the freeway. We have had fires that have gone in the years in between homes in green belts. We have encountered a
So-
lot of fires along Ash Way with individuals that are experiencing homelessness. Where a brush truck would have been extremely helpful.
So let's take the Ashway example that you have. Well, so if you would have requested mutual aid for a brush truck to come in from somewhere else, how long would that take? And if a fire doubles in size, what, every minute or two? Is that right?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. I want to say on average, we'd be looking at about a 20-minute, 15 to 20-minute response for our closest brush truck, which would probably, Chief Eastman, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's brush 71. So it'd be responding from Clearview, considering traffic conditions. There's also a brush truck north. And I don't want to give bad information,
So
but
we can
it'd
work
be
with
a while.
15 minutes.
It'd
And
be
if
a
we
while.
understand that,
Mhm.
lack of a better term, rule of thumb, that a fire will double in size about every minute ish.
It could certainly be different in a wildland situation when you think about relative humidity.
Right.
and-
No,
and
I'm just
conditions.
trying to work
Yep.
with the fact that the fire would expand quickly and having a
Quickly.
brush truck nearby as part of the
Would help.
RFA would put it out. And so the damage that would be sustained would be minimized significantly.
We would be able to do initial attack with this unit and use it in such a fashion that we couldn't use a fire engine, type 1 fire engine or stretch hose. This gives us capability to pump and roll, which is a unique capability on a brush truck that a fire engine typically doesn't have.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Fernahoff, you had a comment, and we'll go to Liaison Swisher and then Vice Chair Rowland.
Yeah, just want to say thank you, Chief, for great information on that. And I am a little curious as to what the extra money buys. I think it's spinners or something on the tires and some flames on the side and, little
Lots of
things
gold.
like that. But, I think Commissioner Kenny makes a really good point, and I have to agree with Chief Eastman. We have an excellent fire department as it is. We have, if we give our staff a direction and a tool, they're going to use it to the best of their abilities. And we have no doubt of that, no doubt on the abilities. But the brush truck, just to re-emphasize, does represent a unique capability. It's 4-wheel drive. No other vehicles that we have are 4-wheel drives at this time, maybe an ambulance in the future, but essentially that is the only capability that we would have to access rough terrain. It has the pump and roll capability. It also carries equipment that's lightweight in nature, suitable for the uniqueness of wildland fire suppression, lightweight hose, smaller fittings, these kinds of things that allow you to get into rougher terrain. We talked about state MOB and how that is a funding source. It is also an excellent platform for us as a emerging leader in Snohomish County for fire department to lead the way when it comes to wildland fire. What we don't see is we see the practicality of the bill, and we think of that in terms of the equipment, but it's more than that. It's a program. It's a program in which we participate in, and we'd like to be just like we are with EMS and all of the other skills that we tend to be looked towards as the leader in this particular program as well. Seattle, for example, for many years didn't have wildland fire rigs. Now they recognize the change in climate. They recognize how fast fires are starting to move. It used to be when I was doing firefighting in the 90s, we'd light it, you get a report of a fire and you get there and you'd have to throw flares on it just to keep the darn thing going. Now it's moving more akin to what we see in Northern and possibly even Southern California in terms of fire spread. I cite the Pierce County Sumner Grade fire. If you're not familiar with that, this is a fire that started in a clearing underneath power lines, and it was underneath a ridge where they had built all these homes. In the years past, it wouldn't have been an issue, except it was wind driven, low relative humidity, hot series of days, and that fire moved so fast that the IC went for a second alarm right away. They even requested state mob, which takes a long time, by the way. State mobilization takes people and equipment all to muster and then get to wherever you need to go. The IC asked, am I going to get a third alarm? They said, nope, you got what you got. And that was structural rigs, which could only do so much with their master streams and quickly ran out out of resources, meaning water. So having those lighter, more tactical rigs that can get into areas is really, really necessary. And like I said, Seattle up to recently didn't have these rigs, with the exception of the two wildland rigs that they owned were actually owned by Public Works, and it was up at their watershed at North Bend. But now fire department has, I think, two, and that intention is to participate in state mode, but also address the ravines and those areas that will burn much faster, much hotter, much quicker as climate change takes effect. So with that, I just want to say thank you.
Well, a lot of you may not know, but in recent years, DNR has started charging everyone who has lots of tree cover in their yards and as part of an entity. I work for a city. We don't normally pay property taxes per se. We'd be paying ourselves. I now get a bill from DNR every year. As a matter of fact, this year I've gotten two, because each year they're reevaluating the areas that can be considered high fire for wildland type fires. I guess they're doing it based off of Google or something like that. And honestly, it really irritates us, because I'm like, why am I paying DNR? Because that's what I pay South County Fire for. I know DNR's not coming if we have a fire. I know it's South County Fire. And hearing about this brush truck and its capabilities and everything, in particular, we have Briarwood Park, which is a huge park. And there aren't a lot of ways into it. And you're going to be hard pressed to get an engine anywhere close. But with this vehicle, it sounds like it's going to drive right on in there and get to where it needs to go. That to me is important, because again, I'm having to pay a stupid DNR tax yearly now for something that DNR is not going to provide for the citizens of Briar. South County Fire is going to be providing it, and I know that. And so I appreciate the fact that you guys have looked into something that would provide that kind of service to us. Because actually, how this got brought to my attention was one of our citizens got charged for the DNR charge first, and came in wanting to know why this new charge was on their tax bill and what were they getting for it. Now, with the purchase of this brush truck, I can at least say, well, South County Fire's got a brush truck, and they're going to show up to deal with your fire. Because in Briar, we actually have some of the most canopy coverage and everything within the county, and lots of natural growth protection areas. Those areas have lots of underbrush that could go up in a hurry. And when those go up, all those big trees that are sitting above them will go too. And I appreciate the fact that you guys looked into getting this resource. And I liked hearing about all the other options that the resource would provide. It sounds like you did a lot of thorough investigation into how this could benefit you the most. And that benefits us as the taxpayers. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Liaison Swisher. Vice Chair Rowland.
I thought, and I'd have to go back, that when we.
Mike.
Thank you. I'd have to go back, but I thought when we first spec'd this out that it was going to be a type 4, a type 5 truck. Type 6 is, at least from what I can understand, I don't know much about the truck that we've selected, but is about 100, or at least from the DNR stuff, it's 150 gallons.
That may
it's
have
not
been
a-
my fault, because I was suggesting some alternate wildland urban interface vehicles, which are known as type 3, but we settled on a type 6, which is the lightweight tactical vehicle.
Gotcha. So some of the research that I did prior to this meeting, and I tried to pull it up, I found some of it. the price tag on this doesn't seem to be in line with what I saw for new brush trucks. Even some brush trucks that I found that were kind of borderline category 5, which is about 300 gallons, something like that. Is that correct?
You know, it's interesting as you look at various brush trucks or various configurations. Typically, I'm a red carded former wildland guy myself, and have deployed on state mobs, local incidents and all that. So I can speak with some confidence when I say that typically the camp for Northwest region, the Washington State, and just the Northwest in general, revolves around a type 6. There's a lot of capabilities on a type 6. And this one in particular, I want to say has close to a 400-gallon tank. So it's a rather large tank, and the chassis itself will support that. And then the other categories that you look at for wildland components are your type 1s, which are typically, they're structural pumper. They're just a normal fire engine. They're referred to as a type 1, and they're typically used for structure protection or backfilling if you're on a MOB or a deployment, backfilling the municipal city station, for example. And then there is your interface apparatus, which are typically your type 3s. Those are very common in the California region because they can do a little bit of both. We have very hilly terrain. We have a lot of dirt roads, 2 tracks, fire roads that these rigs would be going into. And in a lot of the interface or a lot of the response capabilities revolve around 4-wheel drive capability, light loads, and a type 6 with its componentry fits that category excellent. And California is starting to discover the ability of a type 6. So that's how we ended up with the type 6. I don't know if I answered your question fully. I feel like I kind of deviated a little bit there, but I hope I offer a little bit more insight.
Yeah, so some of the numbers that I was seeing was, anywhere from like 150 to 225. What I could find for what kind of average price for these were, I couldn't find anything up in the 270. You said that we've added a few things to it to, bring it up 50 grand from kind of the biggest I could find. That, again, prices are hard to find online, and getting stuff made is hard. So I don't want to hold you to just my Google sleuthing. Or
if it's okay, I'd like to advertise some of the hard work that the committee did to identify some of the tools that this rig will have, specifically a remote turret. That allows for that pump and roll capability. There's also some other aspects as far as some modifications to the suspension and bring the ride height of the vehicle up. We went with, I want to say this is a 5500. This is a Dodge 5500 chassis. So it's borderline commercial grade, it's as beefy as it gets in this category of truck. It's still the base model. It's nothing too flashy. It's not like your chrome package or anything like that. There are some components on there. Without looking in depth on the spec, I know that when I looked at it with my eye, and I went back and forth with Captain Pickens on this. Do we really need this? Do we not? Where can we shave and all that? And that's how we ended up with this. And I do agree, there are some apparatus out there, but they may or may not have the same compartmentation. They may not have the same pumping capability, and they may not have the same water tank configuration. This vehicle is well spec'd, has a lot of compartmentation on it. And from experience, when you deploy on a type 6, where to put your gear, and I see Commissioner Fairnoff nodding his head, where do you put your gear and your personal items is very important to the folks when they're gone for up to 2 weeks at a time. If this vehicle were to deploy, not saying that it will, but if it were, there are some considerations brought into this design spec. And then the other challenge that we ran into is a lot of those vehicles that we saw out there, and I looked, they're really tough to find. And a lot of times when we called, they're gone, and they had high miles or maintenance problems, or they were not diesel. diesel was very important for our design team.
And there's
a
number of problematic diesel engines out there too.
Correct. And they're gonna be pulling a pass or a hill or something like that, or that's where diesel was very important for them. You know,
Gotcha. I will say that you said bidding process would take about 2 months to do, and the concern was getting this, truck before, I guess, what's the date that you're trying to hit with this, and when are they going to deliver this?
boy, I'd really like to have this rig delivered, upfitted and in service by the end of May. I think that that's our target right now is May, and that's just before the wildland season or wildfire season really starts.
Gotcha. Seeing that we spent a year trying to get this thing even off the ground. I wish we had seen competitive bidding, because we could have gotten that out of the way, so we had that 2 month, window there to make us feel more comfortable. I personally on this one, I think I would feel more comfortable given the numbers that I saw, in my research, and it's just my research, with having competitive bidding, and have those facts on the table as opposed to, just what we have right now. As far as the facts that I have is just that you guys did a lot of work and that, this is the one that you found. But I don't have anything more than that. So,
Commissioner Rowland, I can say that we did reach out to many of our manufacturers. Some manufacturers or dealers that we have worked exclusively in the past have been quoting us prices of upwards of $330,000 for a comparable vehicle. I don't know specifically what you were looking at per se, but I can tell you that we did have a far range of prices, and Rebel, what clued us in on Rebel was the price was much closer to the budgeted dollar amount, and it was within the delivery time that we were comfortable with. I have emails, quotes, phone calls, notes, all the way up to about $330,000 and 32 months or something right around there of delivery time. So that left me as a head scratcher. I was like, well, I don't want to spend $330,000 and wait 3 years to get it.
yeah. The other side of this is for budgeting purposes, the number that you guys came to us with was supposed to be kind of the top end to allow you to get everything that you
Yes, sir.
needed. And we're sitting about a year later and it's, 10% higher than that. Either we need to do better upfront on our budgets to get the numbers that will actually fill our needs. Or we need to be careful about the fact that when we budget something, coming back later and going, well, we budgeted for this, but we found one that's more. I know that we have supply chain issues. I think part of these supply chain issues have dipped into profiteering and people making more money because they can by, reducing the availability of some of these pieces of equipment. And having the taxpayer kind of on the hook for that kind of business practice isn't a great thing. If it's private sector, they have profits, they can do what they want, but we're trying to be careful here. So I do think that we need to be careful about budgeting something and then trying to keep to that budget as best, as possible for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Liaison Switcher, when you mentioned the Briarwood Park, that it got me thinking about other parks within the RFA, and ones that came to mind was Lindale Park. That's a big park. I remember doing Cub Scouts camp there, and they have an amphitheater that's pretty deep in there that could make it difficult for a rig that's used to working on the asphalt. Another area that was come to mind was the Zoomies HQ there, right along I-5. It's a lot of difficult area for a truck to get into. Even Picnic Point Park there, it has a lot of terrain that would be difficult for a truck to get into. Maplewood, yep. Meadowdale Park. I don't know if all of you guys have come down that quarter-mile steep hill. It's not so bad when you're going down, like sledding on a hill, but when you got to go back up, that's a whole other story. But that would be difficult for a regular engine to get into, as well as Yost Park also came to mind there in Edmonds. That would be pretty difficult to get a fire engine into, even into the front entrance is fun with a car. So Those are just a handful of uses here locally within the RFA. So any further discussion, commissioners? All right, ready to vote. All those in favor of the resolution, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
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 It sounds like the ayes have it, so motion carries. And we will go on to item 11, committee updates.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
point of order. Can you just call the vote count on that? I know you said the ayes have it, but was that a 4-2 vote, or what was the vote count?
I got 4-2.
4-2. Thank
Yeah,
you.
the nays were Commissioner Kenny and Vice Chair Rowland, and the rest of us voted aye for it.
Very good. Thank you.
On to committee updates.
If I may, just for a moment, I just want to say my no vote was in no way saying that we don't need this equipment. It was more process and being over budget. Thank you.
On to finance with Commissioner Chan. He is not here tonight. He sent an email that he had an emergency come up, so he was unable to attend tonight. I don't have a report. Commissioner Lawrence, I know you sit on that committee. Do you happen to have anything? You're on mute.
Commissioner Chan sent an email that spelled out pretty clear what we did here. And he said, we had a very productive meeting reviewing our long-term financial outlooks, blah, blah, blah. And then we don't have any issues, any glaring issues that we'd be objecting to. So in other words, our staff is doing a pretty good job.
Thank you for that summary report, Commissioner Lawrence. On to intergovernmental with Commissioner Fernhoff.
The intergovernmental has not met, and we're just based on the same briefing we gave last week in terms of Edmonds and other things that are in process.
Snow 911, those finance committee this last week, and moved a bunch of items to the main body, and that meeting is coming up here on Thursday. On to commissioner comments. Commissioners, liaison. All right, I have one item to ask the commissioners. We had a tentative meeting scheduled for the budget to have further discussion on next Tuesday, October 24th. Is there anybody see a need for that? I've made a point to bring it up in each meeting, the board deliberations under unfinished business. This time, I think that we should go ahead and pull it, but looking for consensus from the rest of the board. Commissioner Teoflack.
Yeah, we haven't had that many questions, so it seems like we don't need to have that additional meeting.
Vice Chair Rowland.
I just want to bring out that one of our commissioners was absent tonight, and he tends to ask a lot of questions. I don't know if I'm not saying we should have the meeting, but I just want to make sure that when we go to actually pass this, that we allocate time for that, given that the fact that he didn't have the opportunity to ask things tonight.
Anyone else? Okay. Then I'd like to make a motion to that we pull the meeting that we had tentatively planned for Tuesday, October 24th to further discuss the budget. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Lawrence. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. And we will move into executive session for collective bargaining pursuant to RCW 42.30.140 sub 4 sub A as in Adam, sub B as in boy, and with no action to follow. And we'll start off for 20 minutes.
The executive session has been extended for 10 minutes. The executive session has been extended for 10 minutes.
That was the old wash. It's 10:10 and I adjourn the meeting. It was just